Hi Mole class, how are you doing? Hope you're all outside enjoying the sunshine if you can, getting that daily exercise, doing all that fantastic work. Thank you very much for sending me all your fantastic work. It's been great to see what you've been doing at home. So we're going to start the story again for today. So welcome to chapter 5 of The Creakers, or episode 5. We're actually on chapter 8. Okay, so Lucy's arms started feeling wobbly and tired. Her legs felt like they were made of mashed potato, and she realised she was losing her fight with the floor. But oddly enough, the very second Lucy stopped struggling and wriggling, the wall seemed to let her go. Her feet came out first as she plopped out of a hole and fell a few metres, but before she landed, she stopped in mid-air, just hovering, like one of those astronauts on the International Space Station. Yep, Lucy was floating, just above the ground. Except the ground wasn't beneath her feet now, it was above her head. And everything was the wrong way up. The moment Lucy realised this, she went toppling up to it with a wet thud, landing next to the hole she'd plopped out of. Lucy was in the Wallop. Whatever the Wallop is, she muttered. She stood up, which was now down, brushed herself off, which was now on, and her head began to feel all twisted with this backwardsness. She took a step forward, which was now backwards, and stumbled a little as the ground wobbled underneath her bare feet. It was the strangest thing she'd ever stepped on. It felt warm, damp, and squelchy, like standing on a giant tongue. Yuck, Lucy thought. I wish I'd worn my slippers. That's the thing about having adventures in the middle of the night. You can never be fully prepared for them. The air was hot and misty down here in the soggy corridor, and Lucy felt her t-shirt begin to stick to her arms and back. She slicked her fringe out of her eyes, and it stayed there, stuck in place on the side of her forehead by small drops of sweat. The walls were slightly rounded, with ridges on them that arched up over Lucy's head as though she was standing in a giant throat. The thought made her shiver. It also stank. It was so disgustingly rotten that Lucy could feel her eyes watering, and she had to hold to her nose. Suddenly, the hole by her feet started wobbling like mud-flavoured jelly, and Lucy noticed a small wooden signpost next to it with one word written on it. Dunxton. Her surname. And Lucy recognised the writing instantly. It was the same sticky brown writing that had been used in the letter she'd found pinned to the school door. So the Creakers wrote that letter, she muttered to herself as she studied the messy handwriting. The hole wobbled again, and a moment later she heard voices echoing through it, voices and laughter and cackling. There's Lucy in the Wallop. The Creakers! They must be following me down, she gasped. Lucy had no choice but to keep moving deeper into the Wallop, or they would catch up with her and snatch her. She started running as best she could, but it was like being on a bouncy castle or in those dreams when you're running and not getting anywhere. Lucy puffed and panted, and her chest felt tight as she struggled for breath. I've got to slow down, she realised. Then, just like the backwardness of the upside-down floor, as Lucy slowed down and began walking, everything suddenly felt easier, and she realised she could move faster. She only managed to sprint a few slow steps before her foot hit something, tripping her up. She bounced on the wobbly wet ground with a disgusting squelch, and as she came to a halt, out of the corner of her eye, Lucy caught sight of the thing that had tripped her. It was another small wooden signpost in the squishy floor, just like the one she'd seen with her surname on it. When Lucy read what the sign said, her heart leapt with hope. It said, Quirk, in exactly the same sloppy brown writing. And next to the signpost, she saw a small hole, just like the one that she'd plopped out of. Norman Quirk! That has to be Norman's house through there, Lucy thought as she peered into the small opening. She could just make out a dark bedroom at the other end of it. Lucy looked around and saw another signpost just a few metres away, then another and another. There were hundreds, maybe thousands of these little wooden signposts dotted all around her, stretching into the distance of the Wallop, poking out of the steamy mist like tombstones in a graveyard. She began to read all the names scrawled on them. Noying, Badding, Payne, Green, Trundle, Cobblesmith. It's Clutter Avenue, Lucy realised. As she stared at the positions of these signs, Lucy could tell that they all matched perfectly with the houses and streets and buildings of Whiffington town. Next to each post was its own small round opening, like a portal joining this backwards place with the world above. "Oh, little kidderling!" a menacing grunt echoed off the wet walls. "You's not supposed to be down in the Wallop." Lucy spun round. Through the mist she saw 4 pairs of small, black, beady eyes staring at her. Yep. Her heart froze mid-beat. She could barely make out these 4 creatures through the haze, but their piercing eyes were enough to make her want to get as far away from them as possible. Quickly, she looked around at the long, wet, twisted root of the Wallop, which seemed to go on and on, deeper into the ground. "I don't fancy going down there," she thought. "Good idea, Lucy." Although what Lucy didn't know was that in a few chapters she would be going much deeper into the Wallop. Uh-oh. "What?" Lucy thought. "Oh, nothing. Carry on. You were about to escape." "All right," thought Lucy. She took a deep breath, slicked her fringe over and dived headfirst into the jelly-like hole next to Norman Quirk's signpost, hoping, wishing, praying that it led to her world. "She's crawling backs up," one of the creakers hissed from somewhere behind her. "Too late to get her now," grumbled another. "We'll have to snatch her tomorrow," another one creaked. And then the wobbly walls grabbed her and sucked her in deeper, and Lucy could no longer hear them. The sensation of going back down, or was it up? The tight, squishy wormhole was just as weird as when it had swallowed her the first time. Lucy closed her eyes tight and held her breath as the walls wriggled and twisted like they were alive, pushing her along until they spat her into the darkness underneath another bed. She opened her eyes. Her heart was pounding and her breath came in shaky gasps. She was back in Whiffington, in someone else's bedroom. "Hello," she whispered, but there was no reply. She crawled out from under the bed and her legs wobbled as she stood up in the small room, still feeling the effects of the backwards Wallop. The room was covered with all sorts of bits and bobs, from maps and camping stoves to fishing rods and rope ladders, and the biggest collection of Transformers toys Lucy had ever seen. There was also an ironing board with a neatly pressed badge-covered uniform ready for the morning. And hanging on the wall was a photo of a young boy and his father, both in full Scout uniforms, holding a huge fish between them, with even bigger smiles stretched across their proud faces. Definitely Norman's house, Lucy thought, and raced for the door. "Norman!" she called, running downstairs as fast as she could. She yanked open the front door, and to her surprise she was blinded by sunlight as it engulfed her face with warm kindness. It was morning. "Lucy?" Norman said, waking up in his hammock and shielding his eyes from the sun. "Monsters under the bed again?" he asked. "No, creakers," Lucy replied. The hammock swung and swayed as Lucy climbed up next to Norman and told him all about it. Chapter 9. The Plan. "Blimey!" Norman gawped as Lucy tried to explain about the backwards world beneath their beds. "So you think that's where our parents are? In that Wallop?" "Yup," Lucy said. "That's what the creaker said. They snatched them." "And they want your dad's jacket?" "Uh-huh, although I have no idea why." "And they're coming back to snatch you tonight?" Lucy looked at him and nodded. "Blimey," Norman said again. "Double blimey," Lucy added with a worried frown. Norman rustled up a Scout's breakfast of egg and beans on his camping stove, but by the time they sat down to eat they were both so full of worry that neither of them had much of an appetite. "Shall we go for a walk to clear our heads?" Norman suggested, noticing that Lucy hadn't eaten a single baked bean. Lucy smiled and nodded again, but as they wandered into the street it soon became clear that Whiffington no longer looked like Whiffington at all. The kids had been alone for approximately 49 hours, and things had started to get a little, well, let's take a look at the chaos Lucy and Norman saw. Billy Noshling had put his head inside the crisp vending machine and munched all 200 packets of crisps, even the prawn cocktail flavoured ones. Unfortunately, he now couldn't get his head back out again. The only way to free him would be to put some money in the machine and buy him. But since there were no grown-ups around to give the children pocket money, he had no choice but to stay there. Jackson Jilly had released 3 sharks into the public swimming pool and tried opening a small aquarium. However, he'd forgot to mention the sharks to the children who were using the pool at the time. R.I.P. One whole street had had its pavements replaced with trampolines, and the leisure centre had its trampolines replaced with pavement. Neither arrangement worked out very well. 4 children had accidentally flushed themselves down the toilet, clogging the pipes for the rest of the town. And worst of all, Scrummy McScroodle's sweets and stuff had run out of sweets and now only had stuff. Right, see if you can see it. There we go. There's the aquarium, or swimming pool with sharks in. Trampolines on the street. Oh, someone hanging from the lamppost. And there is the boy stuck in the vending machine. Okay, we're going to have to stop there for today. Thank you very much for joining me for another episode of The Creakers. Have a wonderful day and have a wonderful day tomorrow, and I will see you for another episode later. Bye-bye!